Today's message from Reverend Christian Sorensen was recorded on Easter, April 16th, 2017, and it's titled Easter, A Greater Expression of Love, Affirming that I Am Love Expressing. And today we are so blessed to have Rebecca Jade, Carl Anthony, and the Seaside Choir all performing at today's service. Come visit us at seasidecenter.org, or you can join us in Encinitas, California on a Sunday sometime, where we always have great music, a spirited message, and a joyful, loving, vibrant community that await you.
Hello, everyone. I tell you what about that band, huh? Man, you guys are rocking. I suggest sometime on a Sunday, when you come, you just stand right in the middle of them. I was back there. I was having like my own personal revival back there. That was very nice. We can talk about taking turns, and that was great. So I love lots of songwriters, and years ago I recorded a song, one of my favorite songwriters of all times, and it was Joni Mitchell. And she wrote a beautiful song that was a powerful image and a powerful song. It was called Woodstock. And I thought, I recorded it as a duet, and it turned out so beautifully. And so today, I want to sing that for you. I thought it would be an appropriate song for today. But I'm so thrilled that we have someone that's going to sing it as a duet with me, and that is one of my favorite singers in all the world, award-winning Rebecca Jade.
Wow, what an introduction.
And also we have in our backup singers, we have Leslie and also Rebecca too. Yeah, right there. All right, so this is called Woodstock. You ready? Woo. All right.
I came upon a child of God. He was walking along the road, and I asked him, "Where are you going?" And this he told me.
I'm going on down to Yasker's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band, gonna camp out on the land, try and get my soul free. We are stardust, we are golden, and we got to get ourselves back to the
Then can I walk beside you? I have come here to lose the small, and I feel to be a cog in something turning.
Well, maybe it is just the time of year, or maybe it's the time of man. I don't know who I am, but life is for learning. We are stardust, we are golden, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. By the time we got to Woodstock, we were 500,000 strong, and everywhere there was song and celebration.
And I dreamed I saw the bomber riding shotgun through the sky.
everybody. Come on, let's go. Hands together. Saxophone. Let me hear you guys. Come on up. Hey. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Dr. Christian Sorensen.
Carl Anthony, Rebecca J. Carl, Rebecca, oh my goodness, you just, woo! Oh my, oh my, oh my. That's just a physical experience. It takes me back, nostalgia, to a time that, ran into a child of God. You're made of stardust. Oh, wow. I mean, that time of Woodstock where there was just a sense of freedom, a sense of well-being. There was no worries. It was letting go to love. And something J.R.R. Tolkien wrote in Lord of the Rings, actually in the second book, in The Fellowship of the Rings, Bilbo Baggins asked, "Don't adventures ever end?" And the response was, "I suppose not. Just waiting for the next person to take up the story." Going back to Woodstock, going back to that time of love. We're going back to that place and is waiting for you to take up that story and continue to carry it on. Today we're here to celebrate that Jesus story, and it didn't end a couple thousand years ago. It is a story that is waiting for you to take it up and start walking with it and rise triumphant above your challenges and your difficulties. It is a story that is fresh and that is real. And sometimes, it helps to have someone who's gone before us, who can show us the path that is going to be okay, that you can rise triumphant above whatever challenges that you may be facing in your life. I can remember Callie and I, when we were hiking for the first time up to Jewel Basin, and we were climbing up on a path in the peaks of Montana in a place we had never been before. We had a map which had made absolutely no sense to us. And we were going up above the tree line, and it was just all shale. It was not a nice fat path to walk on. It was like 1 foot over another, and little pieces of shale would tumble down this hill for thousands of feet. And I began to have a little extra energy inside me. I'm the guy, I'm the male, I'm supposed to take care of my sweetheart. And it's like, I don't know where we're going, we haven't been here, and we don't want to slip. And I know that I need to calm down, because if I don't hold it all together, I'm going to be in big trouble if we get home tonight. And I'm just working on not being over anxious. And we go around the bend, and then on the backside, it's August, and there's snow, and there is ice, and we try to walk on, and we start slipping. And if you slip, it's like a sled ride for too many feet to figure out. And so we stop, catch a breath. And off across this ridge comes a hiker. And this individual had been out hiking for days, hadn't been home, hadn't talked to anybody, and they were just filled in total bliss. Remember that? Here they came, and just looking into their eyes and seeing the joy and the ecstasy and the bliss of hiking out in nature without a concern in their world just instilled upon us a sense, it's okay. We can choose to be freaking out up here, or we can choose to ride on another person's example, that it's okay, that it is fun. It comes down to our choice. And I sense that this story of Jesus helps us to recognize that, there is somebody who has gone before us and has come up triumphant over death, over fear, over limitations, over crucifixion. I mean, it's a reminder that there's a spirit that is far greater than the temporal powers. We are brought up to think, look at the power of the material world. and what it can do. But anybody who wants to pay attention to history, look back to the days of the pharaohs who dominated the history books, had the Jewish people free themselves. And they weren't the ones with the gold, the silver, or the soldiers. But there was something higher that moved in, that freed them, that was not a temporal power. Take a look at the Russian people in the time of the czars. Who, for a moment, who was looking at history, would have imagined the czars who had the power in the military would collapse into nothing and the people would rise? Or what about down in South Africa in our lifetime? De Klerk, president, apartheid time, gives up the gavel, gives up the presidency to a guy who's been hanging out in jail for 3 decades. You know, the temporal power doesn't always win. We've got to recognize that there is a power. Take a look at the British Empire giving up India without a war to the people. And we're reminded at this time of the year, this annual reminder at Easter, that there was a guy who said to the Caesars, "You're not the ultimate power." He taught the people the freedom, the abundance. He proved that you didn't need to fear sin or temptation. He was tempted by power. He was tempted all over the place. He showed that not even death had power over him. He was lying there before Pilate. Pilate said, "Talk to me. Jesus, come on, man. I got the power to crucify you or free you." He said, "You don't have any power. The only power comes from above." See, that's the power we're talking about. We're talking about power that's not of this world. We're talking of a kingdom that is not of this world, a kingdom that will overcome this world, but not through violence and not through war. But there's something when we're able to embrace that consciousness, and sometimes it helps to take a look at another person who's been on that path of difficulty, of challenge, and they're making it, that can give us the little oomph, the little push to let us know, hey, we're going to be okay here. Ernest Holmes, he's the founder of religious science, and he writes in his book, The Science of Mind, in the chapter called Finding the Christ. He said that we must understand that the Christ is not a person, but it's a principle. It was impossible for Jesus not to have become the Christ as the human gave way to the divine, as the person gave way to God, as the flesh gave way to the spirit, as the will of division gave way to the will of unity. Jesus, the man, became a living embodiment of the Christ. As the external Jesus gave way to the divine, the human took on the Christ spirit. And yet, it would be a grave mistake to suppose that he was different from others. He was an individual who knew himself and his direct relationship to the whole. So to think of Jesus as being different from others is to misunderstand his mission and his purpose in life. He was a way shower, and he proved his way to be the correct one. Believing in God within, he was compelled to believe in himself. He was a way shower. He wasn't different than you or me. He was an individual, he was a man, or as the story goes, someone who came to discover a consciousness, a connection with a life force, and we call that the Christ consciousness, when all sense of separation dissolves into the nothingness from which it came, and all that remains is a clarity, is a hearing of that spirit that is expressing through you, through me, through the situation at hand. Even if it's a scary situation, let us know it has no power in this world to overcome that kingdom of that Christ consciousness. Even if it is looking at, fallen thousands of feet, there's always a reminder for you to know that there's a way out, that you can rise above whatever the difficulty is in your life and in your world. You are the one who's got to know that. But see, what happens in our society is that we have been indoctrinated, and I don't know if it's consciously or not, to think that you're not the potential of the infinite. People have been taught through their religion that they're not worthy. It's not even religion. You can go to a bookstore. Have you ever seen the shelf with all the dummy books on it? Raising chickens for dummies. Calculus for dummies. Like, come on, give me a break with that one. Sex for dummies. There are 273 titles for dummies that we are bombarded with since the 90s. And if that isn't enough, now there's a whole idiot's guide. with another 100 titles that can tell you how to do it. Imagine if instead of going for idiots and dummies, we decided to write books for geniuses, for that brilliance that is within you. How to date for the brilliant. Yeah. How for spirituality for the genius, for the well-connected. Maybe that's our call, is that it's up to us to bring a new thought and a new perspective, because that rising is above what was. It is rising above what had been. And we are the ones that have got to say, you know what, I'm not going to be sabotaged by a collective something that's going on. I have been called for a time such as this, and that Christ story needs to be carried on. It didn't end 2,000 years ago. It's just waiting for that next person to pick up the story and run with it. There were these two guys out fishing. And they see this woman coming down the river screaming, help, help, save me. And so one of the guys jumps in and they pull her to the shore, they get her breathing again. And they call, whoever, like 911 to come help her, and they take her. And so they go back to fishing. I mean, that's what guys went out to do. So they're out there fishing, maybe 10, 15 minutes later. Now comes a guy down the river, help, help, I'm drowning. One of the guys goes in, rescues him, pulls him to the side, resuscitates him, calls the paramedics, and they take him. The guy's okay, and they go back to fishing. Another 15 minutes later, here comes another person. They save him. They go through the same rigmarole that they had just gone through. And the guys finally looked at each other and said, let's hike up the river, see what's going on. Hiking for dummies. Or geniuses. Anyway, so they go a few hundred yards up the river, and they see a bridge. And on this bridge, they see a crazy man standing in the center of the bridge. And they watch this other woman come walking across the bridge, and he grabs her, and he starts to wrestle to throw her over the side. And the guys come, and they save her. They wrestle with him. They call to get him arrested or taken away or what have you. But what I want us to get from this bizarre story is that we've got that crazy person in our subjective mind that keeps throwing us into the river. I don't care how many positive thoughts you tend to send across that bridge. If you have got the saboteur in consciousness that is wrestling those good ideas down and throwing them over the side, they're never going to get across. And you can keep sending it, but you need to get rid of the saboteur of your consciousness if you want that Christ awareness to blossom and express itself to free you from whatever challenges you got going on in your life and in your world. Now, it seems simple. I get it, but we cling to our story. And I say that because I've been teaching classes for a long time. And inevitably, there's going to be someone who shares their story, and it is heart-wrenching. And I say, okay, are you ready to give that up? And, it's the reason why I don't love. It's the reason why I don't become vulnerable. It's the reason why I can't trust being loved. And I asked a class, like we just did a class on the dark night of the soul, and stuff comes up there. Class 8, Foundations, Forgiveness, comes up there. So what I do oftentimes is I'll just ask the whole class, because there's somebody whose story usually takes precedent. I'll say, would everyone, share a story, a tragedy that went on in your life? A very hard time that just grasped you. And what's interesting is most everyone has a tragic story to share. And I can remember Jesse sharing from his childhood when he was in Little League. His little brother was riding his bike, and the brakes gave out, and he went down into the hill, and he got hit by a car and was killed. I did a memorial service yesterday for a 25-year-old, and the mom and the dad stood up there, just crying. I've heard stories. Someone 19 developed MS and had to live with that. Someone else says their mom and dad and their aunts and the uncles all died of cancer, and now they got to live with that fear. I've had someone else share that they were molested as a child, and they told their mom, and their mom told them not to talk about it. I've had other people share stories about how their partner ran off with another person and left them. I've had other kids say, my one of my parents ran off, and my mom and I had to be raised only on welfare. I've had others say that how they've been betrayed, and they had to go bankrupt by by their partner because they absconded with all the money. I've had people share that their child was A students until they ran into drugs, and the stories are just gut-wrenching. And I have them share that not because sharing it is only going to help them, but it begins to help people understand that we have all had these stories of tragedy. We have all walked on that mountaintop wondering if I was ever going to get down from here. And as we begin to share those stories, we recognize that my pain is not a singular pain, but rather it is part of what goes on in the collective. And people will come back and say, I didn't realize how I made my tragedy so special in my life, how I just so honored that. And I come to recognize most people have experienced some kind of loss in their life, whether it's the loss of love or a loss of a child or loss of a health or loss of a friendship or loss of dignity or business or profession or whatever it is. And we can pile up those losses and say, look how special these are. This is why I cannot love. This is why I cannot rise triumphant. Or I can pile them up and climb to the top and plant the flag and say, I have climbed this mountain and I am greater and I stand taller because of what has taken place in my life. You're the one who gets to decide what you're going to do with this, irrespective of what people said. You know, we're singing your diamonds. But, you offer up your diamondness to a person and they don't get it. It doesn't make you a rhinestone. And yet people will go to God, hands on the hips, and they feel as if they're entitled not to love. This message today is really about the unconditional love. And they'll go to God, hands on the hips, and say, God, look at this face. It's not a happy face. I am really ticked off in this moment. My life has been messed up, and I am not going to love anymore. I'm going to build this wall against my heart and protect myself. And I want you to know that is like a very subtle kind of prison that you find yourself in. God says, hey, you got to love. Hey, forget it, God. I am not happy with life. I am not happy with you. And who's in prison there? Who is not free there? Love is not conditional. Love doesn't retaliate. Love doesn't go on strike. Love doesn't withhold. I love what Calvin said, Calvin and Hobbes. He said, you can call that denial, but I choose to be selective with my reality. What are you doing with your reality? This story is to remind you that no matter what has gone on in your life, that you can rise triumphant. There's somebody coming down from the mountain path that has had it tougher or had more difficulties or died and come back and say, you know what? There is no death. You don't die to become immortal. You're mortal now. So choose to live. Don't live in fear, because if you're worried about what was, you're living in fear with the anxiety of what could happen. We're here to be reminded that, Spirit is seeking to rise, and I've got to let that love flow. Ernest Holmes, he said that love is a cosmic force whose sweep is irresistible. Woo, that's right. That sweep, it's just irresistible. And what does it need to clean up? Whatever that is, you need to forgive it, because those boulders that you have built around you that have entombed you have heavy vibrations of the bitterness, of the anger, of the resentment, of the pain. And they are very subtle in their imprisonment, because you think you're hiding behind a defense that is protecting you, but you're not protecting yourself. You are not letting your light shine. You are afraid to go up any higher on that mountain. You are the one who's being called to rise out of that tomb that has imprisoned you, and you do that with the key of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an important aspect here, guys. You have got to be willing to forgive. And when I say forgive, I'm not saying you got to make what happened okay. I'm not saying that it wasn't horrendous and terrible and sad and wrong. But forgiveness is really for you. When you forgive, you give for you. You give the past back to the past where it belongs. You're saying, I'm not going to pull this forward anymore into my life. Mother Teresa said, you've got to empty yourself if you want to be filled with God. That not even God can fill that which is full. Are you full with the anger, the resentment, the blocks, the pain, and those kind of things? This story is about rolling those stones away. It is about coming out of that tomb and looking around and seeing the light and saying, you know what, it's okay. This Easter story is not a story that ended. This adventure depends upon you picking up and making it real in your life, in your world. It's a personal experience that is being asked of you to be able to move forward in this life and in this world. And, you know, we get the message. We've read this story. We've gone through this story every year annually. And once again, it's to remind us of that life that lives within us, the life that lives in all life, that is seeking to birth itself above the pain, the confusion, the challenges, and the difficulties. We got the story down. But there's a big difference between being able to repeat the story and living the story. Yes? Okay. There's a guy, an explorer, who came back to his village. And he came back from the Amazon. And the people in the village are excited. Tell us about the Amazon. What is it? What's it like? And he said, I can't even begin to find words to explain to you the experience of the exotic flowers, or the energy that you feel when you hear the jungle sounds at night, or what it's like to face the wild beasts and the animals of the Amazon, or to run the rapids and come upon a waterfall. I can't even begin to tell you the experience of that. But what I can do is I'm going to draw a map for you. And I'm going to want you to go and take this map and have the experience of the Amazon. And he drew this map, and the people were all excited. And they took this map and they framed it. And then they put the framed map up on the wall in City Hall. And they got some copies. And those that had the copies now became the expert of the Amazon. Well, why not? They could tell you how long it was, where the bends were, how deep it was, how wide it was. They were now experts, and they had never been there. Well, what our spirituality is doing is encouraging us to go there, that we have been given a map, we have been given a story, but that adventure waits for the next person to carry it on down the line. That Woodstock is calling us back. You are a child of God. You are stardust. That story is not over from the 70s. It is singing in our heart. We just had that experience. That energy is alive within us. And when you allow yourself to have that experience, it transcends what you know. You can't plan for it. You can't figure it out. When you step into that kingdom that is not of this world, that overcomes this world, but not with bombs and artillery, but with a love that is unconditional, with a forgiveness. Isn't Jesus' whole story? I forgive them, for they know not what they do. It is about unconditional love. The brain doesn't get that. That doesn't logically make sense. I'm going to hold it against them until I die. It's like, but what would happen if you chose to live? You might have to give something up, but then you get to begin to see with new eyes something you had never seen before. I mean, could you imagine trying to explain to somebody what green looks like without comparison to a plant, or what blue looks like? There was this video that went viral just in the last week or so about a grandfather who was given a pair of glasses so he could see color for the first time. Some of you saw that. Steve, would you run this? You can't understand what they're saying, but it doesn't matter. It's about a minute and a half, and it's about a grandfather whose kids were given him these glasses. When we put on those glasses, that this whole weekend is about, of forgiveness. Don't know what they did. Of truly the message of the Christ consciousness is that unconditional love. We will rise in our life above whatever the challenges is, and we will see in a new kind of way that will blow us away. We will see and hear that spiritual kingdom that's not of this world. You can see what happens when something new touches one, when there's no reference for it. And so we're encouraged to shine what it is we have. It says, shine your light. You know, I'm the light of the world. You are the light of the world. You know, it's the Spirit, Jesus, the story is what I've done, you can do too. He overcame the sickness, the illness, the temptations, death. And you can do this and even greater things. But you've got to shine your light. And the thing about shining your light is you don't need to stand up and say, hey guys, look at my light. Aren't I spiritual, bright, divine, wonderful? You know, when your light shines, people see it. A lighthouse doesn't sit on the peninsula firing cannons and say, hey, light here, oh! It shines the light. And people are blessed and protected and guided. When you shine your light, you can enter into those challenges and crises and be the light. I love one of the things Abraham Hicks says. It says, just because you shine in crises doesn't mean you need a crisis to shine. So I want you to know that this light, this Christ presence can show up in your world before the challenges, before the troubles, before the difficulties, that through your practice and your meditations, that you can begin to connect with the divine in a way that is rich and wonderful and magical and powerful. You know? And when the challenge comes, Norman Vincent Peale says, remember, always handle emergencies leisurely. You don't need to flip out. You can begin to be that place where the divine touches down, that you leave behind the fears, the worries, and concerns, and just shine your light to the best of your ability, and you will find the clear path on the mountaintops. You will find the way through the times of darkness and challenge. You will discover you are not the first, and that you no longer need to specialize the difficulties of your world and make them something that you continue to keep alive and talk about, but rather that you have chosen to talk about what you can see in this new light in a world that is in technicolor, that is filled with infinite possibilities that are forever seeking to express itself through you. You have been called by the infinite. Say yes to life. God bless you. Hey, let's keep it going as the choir returns to this stage and as our beloved Rebecca takes the microphone and they share a Stevie Wonder tune.
Wow. What an incredible message. Did that all touch everybody? Did that get in your heart and your spirit? Yes. All right. Yeah? That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do, 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 do. As around the sun, the earth knows she's revolving, and the rosebuds know to bloom in early May. Just as hate knows love's a cure, you can rest your mind assured I'll be loving you always. Cause now can't reveal the mystery of tomorrow, but the past it will grow older every day. Just as all that's born is new, do know what I say is true, I'll be loving you always.
Until the rainbow birds and stars out of the sky.
Always.
Until the ocean covers every mountain high.
Always.
Until the dolphin flies and parrots live at sea.
Always.
Until we dream of life and life becomes a dream.
Did you know that true love asks for nothing? Her acceptance is the way we pay. Did you know that life has given love a guarantee to last through forever and another day? Just as time knew to move on since the beginning, and the seasons know exactly when to change. Just as kindness knows no shame, know that through all your joy and pain, that I'll be loving you always.
Until the day is night and night becomes a day.
Always.
Until the trees and seas and darkness fly away.
Always.
Until the day that you can take time later slow.
Always.
Until the day that is the day that is no more. Until the day the earth turns turning right to left.
Always.
Until the earth just goes lasting night and night.
Always.
Until the mother
your words into truth and change that truth into love. And maybe your children's grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren will tell. Oh, yeah.
I feel the rainbow, birds and stars are up the sky.
Always.
I feel the ocean covers every mountain high.
Always.
Until the sun perish in the sea.
Always.
Until we dream of life and life becomes free.
Oh, come on. You can't see it back there, but that's Jim Woodard back there on the guitar. Here we go. Seaside Choir, directed by my mommy.
And that is Rebecca. Oh, my goodness. You are just fabulous. And the Seaside Choir under the direction of Leslie. And that is your kiddo rocking the house. My goodness, Rebecca Jade just won, as you know, for the third year in a row, San Diego Music Awards Best Live Performer, and we see why. Also why Dave Cause just grabbed her to be a headliner for 3 weeks cruise in the Mediterranean in May. So congratulations on that. We're going to miss you in May, but you rock us when you're here. You're just so good. We're blessed.